So we were incorporated very recently, October 2021. And we actually purchased the land through the Helen Cannon Trust auction that was in September in Dwight. And so essentially just some background on myself and how we ended up, creating Nayak Farms. So I was born in Central Illinois. I was born in Peoria, raised in Bloomington. So I've grown up in the heartland around corn and beans for essentially my entire life. I went to Metcalf Lab School over at Illinois State University. And so I was exposed to a lot of programs like 4-H. We also went up to the University Farm in Lexington too as well. So my friends were all children of farmers too, and so that was the very first interest of farming. Fast forward, 35 years later, I'm in Chicago right now. I'm actually a subspecialty physician. I'm an allergy immunology specialist, and you can see I'm actually in our foundation offices. I run the Strength to Love Foundation. We founded in 2019. So we tackle really complex problems, but really simply. So we tackle access to healthcare. So I opened a free asthma and allergy clinic here in Chicago. We tackle gun violence. So we work with legislators to push forth policies in terms of gun violence. And we have actually a bill in the Senate right now, supported by Senator Collins. But in the realm of food insecurity, we had always been interested in farming because quite frankly, we wanted to help areas that were food insecure. And there's quite a bit of food deserts here in Chicago. But being from Central Illinois, my heart has always been in the Midwest, down south of the city there. And in fact, actually, we go back quite frequently to Bloomington. My mother, who passed away from leukemia in 2016, she's actually buried at Evergreen Cemetery down in Bloomington. So we go down there and visit her with the kids, and we stop at Avanti's and we grab Jean's ice cream all the time. And so it's just nice to go back there. But as we drive down on 55 South, we have always been looking to purchase farm to incorporate in our food insecurity project. And so we just really hadn't found a good tenant relationship, And so this auction came up, and there was a large number of parcels that were set to be auctioned. So we actually went down as a family. We visited one of the tenants, actually two of the tenants. One is the Christensen family, Brian Christensen, and his family's actually been farming on one of the parcels in Gardner since the early 1900s. In fact, his family resided in that farmhouse since like 1901. So we had this vision. So I went to Brian, I said, look, we have a goal to bring a lot, because of my scientific background, I was very interested in agriscience. And I said, look, Brian, I really want to do a couple of things. Number one, I want to give away a large portion of our sweet corn to the entire state. And he said, well, Dave, what are you thinking? I said, well, the largest donors from my research were only a few acres. And I said, Brian, I think we should just do something really aggressive. Let's try for at least above 10 acres. So he said, okay, Dave, I think we could do that. And then I also mentioned these other sort of programs I was interested in. For example, cover crops and no-till farming is really an interest of me because of my background in science, but also what I just feel in terms of what's happening with climate change and how it would be likely going to be effective and has already affected a number of farmers here in the state. So Brian said, yes, I want to partner with you. So we ended up winning the auction. We incorporated Nayak Farms. So we're about 150 acres or so. We're in Gardner, Illinois. Right now we have commercial corn and soybeans, and we crop rotate too as well. But really what I wanted to focus, because I'm sure you're interested in terms of how we got partnered in terms of agriscience and Earthsense and aquaponics and hydroponics too. So basically, cover crops, there's only about 3 to 6% of farmers in Illinois who utilize cover crops. Yet they're very important in terms of the farming, because if you utilize them, they can really provide benefit not only to the crops itself, but also to the land. And the reason why I'm so interested in cover cropping, we feel that Nayak Farms is not only a venture for our family, but for future generations. And we look at ourselves as basically stewards of the land. And so not only in terms of the yield and what crops we're producing, we want to take care of the land itself. And to do that, we need to implement cover crops. And so cover crops are important. I mean, firstly, it prevents, soil and wind erosion, right? If you're implementing cover crops, you're actually strengthening the nutrients of the soil itself, right? Two, cover crops are important because as you go the crops, it provides a canopy. So for inclement weather, whether you get really terrible droughts, right, with so much sun, slamming down on your crops, it actually can save the crops in itself, but it also prevents, if you have excessive rain too. So if you have tons of rain, your crops can actually thrive. And actually, we've seen a lot of good data to support that not only are yields better, but the quality of the crop is good too as well when you're implementing cover crops. More importantly, they suppress weeds too, because so the biggest thing I wanted to, talk with Brian, our tenant, is about, we have a pretty good feel for what's happening on the macro perspective, right? So we're seeing a lot of inflationary headwinds coming. We're seeing prices go up, and we can see that in input costs too, right? So fertilizer, you're seeing a 10x in costs of fertilizers. You're seeing an increased cost of not only seeds, but also the fact that you have on the labor side, you're having labor issues too. And so this brings in a wonderful partnership that we had with Earthsense. And I'll explain to you in terms of these sort of costs. So input costs are going up for the farmers. Their labor is short, whether they can hire people or actually themselves, it's really tough. And so when you go to a tenant and you're like, hey, let's do cover crops, in their minds, they're thinking, well, look, not only do we got to buy the cover crops, we got to make sure those specific cover crops are particular to our, crops we're growing, right? So for example, we use cereal rye. 85% of our cover crops will be cereal rye. We'll probably incorporate radishes too as well. And so not only do you have to choose the cover crop, you have to plant the cover crop. And that is about timing too, right? Whether you do it in the middle of summer prior, or do you do it right after the harvest too? And we know harvest this year was really difficult with the rains. Some of these farmers were harvesting into November. And so if you ask them to say, hey, look, do you want to plant, cover crops right after you finished a big harvest into that winter season, the large majority of them won't do that. So taking into account not only input costs, but how much labor intense this process is, we thought about, trying to figure out, well, is there a mechanism that we could incorporate using agriscience, especially in the robotic sense, right? Because one of my key interests is to figure out a way where we can be more efficient as farmers, right? Doing the same work, or maybe even less work, but also providing better yields, better quality of crops, and also taking off, honestly, the stress that the farmer has, right? Farmers are already stretched thin as it is. And now next season and the season after that, you're talking input costs are rising. And because input costs are rising, they have to actually cut costs in their bottom line too. And it's very stressful for them. So to ask them to go ahead and do this, to plant more and to maintain more, I thought would be really an unreasonable expectation. So how do we balance that? That's when I found the University of Illinois. And so, the U of I agriscience, department is just phenomenal. They really are. And they've done research for many decades that has been utilized in the farming community. And so I reached out to Girish Chaudhry. He's amazing. And I would really recommend you look him up. So he's professor of agriculture and biological engineering at U of I. And so his lab developed this Terrasentia robot. It was a partnership with the Department of US Energy in the Advanced Research Project. And what they did was he founded this robotic startup called Earthsense. And Earthsense with Chinmay Soman. And so him and Chinmay founded Earthsense. And basically their purpose is to grow healthier fuller crops while also reducing the input costs. So they incorporated their robot, their TerraSensio robot, into doing this. And what Earthsense does, they do two basically primary goals, is to take these robots and to go out into fields and provide real-time crop data and soil data too. That's a huge aspect of their program. Now, one of the things that's complicating in that sense is the access to broadband, right? So when you're taking all of this data from the fields, you have to uplink it to the cloud, right? And so in many of these rural areas, there's just not enough broadband. So the robots actually have to collect the data, go back to a hub, and then upload it to the cloud. So that's one aspect that they're doing. And what they can do is they can actually help out in the realm of the quality of soil, but also the types of seeds, and the seed phenotyping of the crop itself, with the goal of producing better crops. But more importantly, what they did was they actually pivoted to the ability for these robots to actually plant cover crops. And so that's where this sort of aha moment came, where I said, hey, let's see if we can actually incorporate their robotics agri-science into our farm. And so that's our plan. So I spoke with Chinmay, and he's very excited. So we are planning to have our first planting of our cover crops later in 2022. And they'll deploy 3 robots on our farm with our choice, likely serial ride in our fields. And he'll deploy the robots into like the planting rows, and they'll deploy the cover crops. And my plan is, our hope is that we cover crop the entire farm this year. And I'll talk to you more about, I'm sure you're familiar with the cover crop deductions with the Illinois Department of Agriculture. I'll talk to you about that because that's a really important program. So the goal is to bring out 3 robots is probably what's going to happen. We'll have basically do runs in the fields with these robots. Our goal is within 2 days, have the entire acreage planted with the cover crops. So not only is that saving Brian, our tenant, immeasurable time, right, and labor, but we're hopeful that this is something that we can utilize not only during like one planting during the summer, but we'll likely do it also in the winter too, to you know, robotically do this sort of work without having Brian to worry about that is great. But also we're getting the benefits of being good stewards of our land too. And so my hope is that the quality of our commercial corn and soybeans and our sweet corn improves, but we also have better yields too. I don't want to miss the cover crop deductions, because that's something that I believe Nayak Farms is really trying to help out. So as I mentioned before, our Strength to Love Foundation works as with our lobbyists and our legislative team. Well, we also want to incorporate that framework into Nayak Farms. So the cover crops deduction, so basically it's a crop premium discount program. And the applications open December 15th, and you essentially take it to your county bureau. So we're in Grundy County. And you have to take your FSA paperwork of how many acres you have to provide verification that you're planting these cover crops. And basically per acre, you get a $5 deduction off your premium discount, which is huge. And so the crop discount program, which is interesting, is a first come, first served basis, right? And what was surprising, it started 2 years ago, and within a few days, all of the money had already been earmarked for those who applied. And so this year they allocated, I believe it was $660,000. And based on my conversations with the Department of Agriculture and the FSA offices, they opened December 15th, all $660,000 were earmarked by December 27th. So, I mean, within a few days, all of them are gone. So what Nayak Farms would like to do is to work with the Department of Agriculture, to work with not only the lobbyists, but those legislators that are, integral in terms of the appropriations, so that we can actually get next year and the year after a rising earmark for this monetary discount premium program, because it's very interesting that you can incentivize farmers if they see a discount off their crop insurance at $5 an acre. That's a substantial discount where, again, we're helping them on their bottom line of input costs, right? And so we feel at Nayak Farms that this is something that we want to be a part of, that not only are we helping farmers on input costs, but we're also creating an environment now where they're incentivized to plant cover crops, right? The more acreage you plant, the more discount you get, but you also are obviously helping your land in itself as well as your crop. So we're very interested not only in pushing the importance of cover crops, but also saying to other farmers through Earthsense to say, hey, look, Girish can come and do 150 acres within a day or two. I'm sure that Earthsense would likely look at this opportunity for other farmers to incorporate their technology into their farms as well. And as hopefully their production of the Terra Santio robot improves, that maybe they could deploy more robots to farms over the state of Illinois. I think that's just going to be an excellent opportunity for not only Earthsense, but also farmers here in Illinois to take advantage of the cover crop discount program, but also incentivize so that we can push the 3 to 6%, and we can push that up over the next 5 to 10 years. So again, going back to this concept of food insecurity, I guess when one thinks of Illinois, at least for me being born and raised and living here all my life, when I think of Illinois, I literally think about corn and beans, really. And if you look at our corn and bean production in comparison to other states in the United States, we are in the top three annually. So I said to myself, how can we how can we impact those in food insecure environments greatly on a big scale? Not necessarily at the micro level of food banks, but how can we really take advantage of being a farmer and looking at environments who are really impacted by food insecurity? And I think this really compounded during the pandemic. As you are well aware, the pandemic has really put a financial strain and burden on many people who are in both the middle and lower class communities. And those that had one time a dual income family, now that are forced to actually just be single income families, many are really hurting in the realm of not only access to food, but access to fresh food. And many food banks here in the Chicago area, but even outside throughout the entire state, are seeing a tremendous demand in their services, but almost to where they cannot even meet the demand of how many people are in need of food. So what we decided was, again, from the very outset, we wanted Nayak Farms to be an example for other farmers who would like to give who have many acres, who could potentially give that. And so through our research, we realized this. There are, over 70,000 different farms here in Illinois. And some of them are very small and some of them are very large. But we looked into terms of how much farmers are actually donating of their land to, in terms of their crops, to different food banks. And what we found is that it's actually, farmers are really generous, don't get me wrong, but it's not as much as you would think. And it actually goes into the prospect of the fact that farmers, it's very difficult to actually harvest the crop that you're trying to donate, whether it be sweet corn or even specialty crops, and logistically package them and then have people come from the various food banks to either pick it up, or the farmer themselves logistically hiring, let's say, a driver to package everything, bring it over to the food banks, coordinate volunteers, get it off the trucks. It actually costs quite a bit of money. In addition, the tax system here in Illinois, when you're filing, whether it's your Schedule E or your Schedule A, to donate your crops, there's really not the best incentives to do that. And so what we want to do at Nayak Farms is, firstly, in 2022, our goal is to donate 350,000 pounds of sweet corn. And what we've done is we've reached out to, and we've partnered with Feeding Illinois. Steve Erickson, who runs that program, is outstanding, and as well as the Greater Chicago Food Depository, but also, the geographic food banks in St. Louis and down south. And our goal is to give 350,000 pounds of sweet corn to the entire state. So we will be the largest donors of sweet corn. And in order to accomplish something as big as this, we had to really figure out logistically, how are we going to do this? Because as you know, sweet corn is harvested in August through, October-ish. And so we don't want to outstrip the demand side by flooding the supply side, right? So if you give 350,000 pounds of sweet corn, we needed to logistically figure out, okay, how are we going to truck all of this corn to either northern Illinois through Feeding Illinois, through Chicago, Greater Chicago Food Depository, and even south to St. Louis, and even to Evansville too as well. So some of our corn will get into eastern Iowa, eastern Missouri, and western Indiana. So how do you do that? Well, Nayak Farms is in the process of purchasing a 53-foot trailer with a reefer trailer with a Thermo King on it. Because quite frankly, we need to make sure that when we harvest our corn, that it's not only packaged in our wire bins appropriately, but it's kept at appropriate temperatures as we distribute that out to the food banks. So then we also figured out on our farm, because of our recent acquisition of the land, we said, well, what if we don't strip the demand side by filling the market with just this huge influx of supply? What if we build a processing and also storage area on our farm? And so that's a goal. We're starting to break ground. Our goal is to break ground in April, May, and we're building a large commercial cold storage area. And we have utilized the ColdBot technology. I'm not sure if you're familiar with ColdBots. It's ColdBot. I'll make sure to give you this information, Tara. It's amazing. So essentially, you can create, if you have, without ducting, an area of large storage capacity, you can integrate this ColdBot machine and it will bring the ambient temperatures down to the freezing area. And so we're building essentially a large corn storage freezer area that will actually hold probably close to around 40 to 60,000 pounds of sweet corn. So that when we harvest, we'll put a portion in our storage facility. Then we'll also give us a portion. Obviously, the large proportion will be donated that season, but then we can actually make runs to different food banks in February and May, right? So when there is actual need in the wintertime. So this is going to be our pilot program. Our goal longer term is to donate 1 million pounds of sweet corn by 2025. That's our goal at Nayak Farms. Further, our main goal is to show that we have a program that works to other farmers, right? So why are we purchasing a semi-truck? Well, it's obviously for our corn to be donated, but we would be glad to help out other farmers logistically, right? We would take our model program, provide it to the other farmers to say, hey, look, if you had 1,000 acres, could you maybe donate an acre or two of sweet corn every year? And you can borrow our sweet corn picker, which we're purchasing too. We could logistically give our truck. We would have volunteer truck drivers, or we could even hire a truck driver to come down to your farm, borrow our sweet picker, put it in the wire bins, load it into our trucks, and then we drive it that same day to different food banks, food processing distribution centers like Feeding Illinois in the Northern District or Greater Chicago Food Depository, even in St. Louis or wherever they're at. And what we're hopeful is that this will spur farmers to say, hey, look, not only can I donate some of my acreage, but we're working again in Springfield to say, hey, look, if you donate your land, that you would be eligible for tax benefits, right? That's our main goal on the policy side, is that we want to incentivize both farmers, not only for the greater good, and farmers are just super generous people, but also that they get the tax incentives for giving up an acre or two, or maybe 5 acres. So this year, we have a little over 16 acres we're donating this year. If the program is successful, we look at the supply and demand metrics, right? Because we will at each of the major food bank initiatives in the geographic area. If we find that we are meeting the demand, then we can keep this in perpetuity at this amount. Our goal is to, carve out even more acreage in our farm. And that's why I want to talk to you more about aquaponics and hydroponics, because I'm really excited about this program too, because not only do we want to give sweet corn away, but there are many other specialty crops that we could actually help donate to the food banks too in Illinois. So for example, I became interested in aquaponics because we were building this commercial storage area, and I said to myself, well, why wouldn't we just build a greenhouse in the back? And so I did some additional research and found, this field of aquaponics and hydroponics. And it is a tremendous area where you can take small geographic areas of land and just grow quite a bit of both specialty crops and even fish. So we are partnering with a company called Growspan, Growspan. Their corporate base is in Connecticut, but their manufacturing base is in Iowa, eastern Iowa. So they're not too far away from our farm. And so what we're planning to do in this greenhouse, we're earmarking a portion of the greenhouse to aquaponics. And so aquaponics is really amazing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically you have a closed system where the water that you're using to, let's say, so we use a 150-gallon tank, and we're actually growing tilapia in it. And over the year, we're hopeful to grow about 90 pounds of tilapia. And that's a small amount, right? But again, this is a pilot program. And that water, because obviously when you grow fish, that water is utilized by the fish. But what happens is that in this closed system, that water can actually provide nutrients to plants that are being grown, specifically lettuce. And so it's a closed system where you can grow tilapia and lettuce. And so our goal is to grow 90 pounds of tilapia. We're going to grow hundreds of heads of lettuce in this aquaponics system. And then in the hydroponic system, which we're going to be using these Dutch buckets, DUTCH buckets. And essentially, this is really for more vertical growth farming of specialty crops. So we're going to use, we're going to have tomatoes, we're going to have cucumbers, we're going to have eggplants in these Dutch bucket systems. And so we're going to, and again, it's completely all natural. You're not requiring any pesticides, but really what you can do is grow quite a bit of specialty crops just in a small area. Our greenhouse will be about 40 feet by 60 feet. So it's not small, but it's not big either. We're going to grow these crops. And again, we're going to actually process them on the farm in our, not only, so you have the corn freezer area. Beside that, we're actually going to put in a fridge area so that we can store these specialty crops, and that we'll go ahead and donate those too as well. So really Nayak Farms is, I would just basically summarize this as, a farm of, trying to solve complex problems in simple ways. If you're hungry, let us feed you. I will let you know too. I mean, I'm happy if you throw this in there too. I'm actually going to open a free allergy clinic on our farm. We've done so well here in Chicago treating uninsured patients. So when you walk into my free asthma and allergy clinic, and actually it's the first free asthma and allergy clinic that's dedicated to that in the entire Midwest. I only see uninsured patients. They come in here, everything's paid for. Their blood work, their exam, their breathing tests, and even their medications too. We partner with a pharmacy here. So after you sort of build one free clinic and you get, your partners and you get industry help, one of the things I've completely understood being from Illinois, especially from Central Illinois, is that firstly, Chicago is not the end all be all to our state. Secondly, the problems we see in Chicago, many people are experiencing outside of Chicago. Access to healthcare, food insecurity, and even problems with gun violence too. And so we don't believe that Strength to Love Foundation and Nayak Farms, this unique partnership, has to just be in Chicago only. We want to help the people of Illinois, specifically Central Illinois. So we're very excited to open up this free clinic down in Gardner. I'll serve essentially patients in Pontiac, Dwight, and Joliet in that area. But I will say this, in my clinic here in Chicago, I have patients that come from Wisconsin, Indiana, and Iowa. So I do expect that a number of people will travel to see me, and that's great. I plan to, incorporate our industry partners too, to bring in free medicine. So when I say free medicine, these are medicines that you would get at an academic hospital like Northwestern. New cutting edge medicines that are available to my patients. So we're excited with that. So that'll be on Nayak Farms. It's going to be a big operation, but we're really excited to not only partner with the community in Gardner, but also just to help the people of Illinois in itself. It's something that we've been looking to do for a long time, and we feel that Nayak Farms is that avenue to do it.